Look, I opened this jar of rotten baby food, and well, a butterfly came out.
Was that like
Huh?
was that like too deep, dude? Like, was that like
No.
weird and stuff? Okay, cool. Um,
Hilarious. Welcome to the Comedians in Elevators podcast. I've got my guest, Jenn Henry. Jenn, say hi, introduce yourself, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, how's it going, man? I am stoked to be here. A little bit surprised that you appear to be in an elevator. However, maybe I'm on the other side of the open door. Uh, you looking behind me? So,
Yeah.
so we're comedians in elevators and but not apparently. The crux of what I do is voice acting. I'm also an audio producer. I have a heavy radio background from way back in the day. Is I guess as far as women go, maybe probably would fall into the shock jock category as
Mm.
chicks go. But at stand-up comedy, comedy writing and collaboration, and a speaker at conferences and events and
Well, we can do some heavy comedy if you're down for it. Are you down,
oh,
Jenn?
dude, I'm down. Let's rock. I love the opportunity to play. I mean, this screams sandbox to me. I have no idea what the hell's going on. So let's just run in like our hair's on fire. Let's do it.
Exactly.
Wait, what do the kids say now? Let's go. All right.
Listen, to my regular listeners, I know you don't like when at the beginning of these conversations I ask you to subscribe. None of us like it. I don't like saying it. I don't like it being in here. But it's frustrating. You know what else is frustrating? It's also frustrating when I look in the back end of the YouTube channel and I see that 56% of you that watch frequently haven't yet subscribed. And I know this because I see it in the comments section. You say things like, I didn't know I didn't subscribe. And that's actually what fuels the show. Basically, it's like you're making a donation to the show. So that's why I ask all the time, because it enables us to build and build and build. And we're going for the long term here. Hit the subscribe button and we'll continue to build this show for you. That's my promise. Thank you to all you guys that do subscribe. It means the world to me. All right, so the whole point of the podcast is to compare and contrast the comic versus the comedian. So I define the comic as any person telling funny jokes versus the comedian who's a funny person telling any jokes. So Jenn, would you agree that you start as a comic and evolve into a comedian?
Not necessarily, no. I believe that
Okay.
it's two sides of the same coin
Mm-hmm.
because you have people who are organically funny and so they can tell a story about anything and it can come off and evoke the same reaction that somebody telling a joke might have, even though they're not being intentionally funny. Whereas the professional comic, I don't think every comedian has aspirations to be a comic, if that makes any sense.
Okay, so you've seen it. So another way to look at it, I also can argue that the comic is external and the comedian is internal, like a
Yes.
character.
Yep.
All right. Yeah, it's not necessarily professional versus amateur or any other direction, but so we can look at it from that perspective as well. So you ready for the first question, Jenn?
Absolutely.
All right.
Do
So it's
do
about
do do
uh-huh.
do. All right.
Game shows are coming next. So
All
the role
right.
the role of persona in comedy. So how much of the comedian's voice is a character versus their real self?
Their voice in terms of vocal attribute or their voice in
Well,
terms of the voice is what encompasses us as human beings and what we portray and what we put out there.
right. Well, if you look at it from the perspective of the comedian has an internal dialogue more than the comic who has the external kind of dialogue going, that's my argument. So, is it them or is it a character they're just putting on?
I think it depends very much on the comedian. If you want to get kind of crazy Jungian psychology, the old dead guy of archetypes, we are so many different people and personas wrapped into one, and not necessarily in a Sybil kind of way, but the relationship that we have at any given point. People ask that I think on a regular basis, as far back as radio and doing, is that really you? Are they really like that? I think all of it is a part of who we are that comes forward, but that doesn't mean that persona is representative of who the individual is all the time. They may be very different off stage. I mean, Lewis Black is probably not walking into Starbucks going, so,
Hmm.
but that's his shtick, if you will. That's his persona on stage. I think
So
it's a
then
part of us, but not all of us.
does authenticity matter, or is illusion part of the magic?
Yes, yes, and
Okay.
because in order to have an effective persona, it has to come from some place that is authentic. Otherwise, people will just call bullshit on it. It's not going to be effective. It's not going to be attractive to anybody because people can sense that. So if even it's a character or a caricature of, that you put out on stage, or when you're on, if you will, to take the professional element out of it, when you're on and around people, I believe it's definitely insight into a part of who you are, but it's not the whole picture.
Right.
So it that authenticity has to be there because there's a connection point and there's an element of real that pushes that forward. Otherwise, nobody's going to be engaged by it.
All right, so let's look at it from the perspective of punching up versus punching down. So where do comics versus comedians subscribe to this? And let me put it in some historical context. Did a jealous medieval prince become the first comedian by killing the court jester?
No, I think he became the first heckler. The
Okay.
first really toxic heckler. I probably is where that falls into play. That doesn't feel like punching down as opposed to reacting out of ugly human instinct, which punching down also can be. However, in the framed the way you put it, I don't believe. I just think that was an asshole. He
Major.
was the heckler. Yeah, yeah. He was major bad medieval heckler. So and those folks serve a purpose in professional and not professional, and usually they need help. I
So then is the audience agreement with the comedian a form of permission or alignment?
think that can sway with the wind too. I believe it's what the audience wants out of the moment. Theoretically, if you are standing, whether you're standing around in a group listening to somebody who is socially funny, being socially engaging, even if they're performing in a way versus paying a ticket to go see somebody on stage, if you're in that space with that person for more than a couple of minutes, you know who you're there to see, so to speak. If the audience sides with a heckler, if you will, then it's probably something that the person on stage needs to do a real quick read on. If you don't know your house, then, in punching up or punching down, any room that you walk into, you've got to know your house. So depending on what you say, it's the people that are around you that are going to decide what you're doing, unless you're just a bundle of freaking sunshine no matter where you go, and that's going to annoy somebody too. So
Yeah, I can
it's
imagine.
so subjective.
It's super subjective. I can, yeah, just imagining that the rest of the court applauds the prince after he kills the jester instead of getting upset about it. So those
Right.
are the
Yeah.
two directions it can go.
Did they hate the gesture and they're glad that they wiped him out, or are they socially obligated to applaud for the prince or meet the same fate?
That's
in
right.
in what we're the context of what I believe we're talking about, generally speaking, we're not under that kind of threat. But when you frame it up, is the audience siding with the heckler versus the comic or comedian? That really has, I'm just thinking about it now, that would have everything to do with the house that you're in,
Right.
and how they're taking you and how you handle the situation. I mean, if you stab a dude for for saying your mom works on the docks, you're
Hmm.
probably not going to be terribly well received for that. People are going to side with the guy that you just stabbed.
All
So
right. All right. So how about cultural translation of comedy? So, how do jokes that work in one country bomb in another?
the comic comedian, the person on stage, the person trying to be funny, if you will, has not educated themselves in terms of environment, culture, even things that are relevant in the US are not going to be relevant even in other English speaking countries because they don't exist. And that crosses over all over the place. If somebody from the UK comes over and makes a joke about kettles, well, that's going to be largely lost on a US audience, because if a US audience goes over and says something about making water for tea in the microwave, they're not going to get it because that's not what they do there. So even something as simple as basic everyday life sort of cultural stuff, you got to know where you are to know whether or not something's going to resonate.
I could see a confused British person taking a little bell and say, "What about my kettlebell?"
Yeah,
All
what
right,
about what
so-
about my right?
So cultural trans. Oh, so how does the silence when your joke doesn't land hurt? Physically, emotionally,
Yes.
morally, or spiritually?
To your friggin' core, guy. I mean, of course, you've never had something go awry while you're on stage. But I believe that for a lot of us, there's, I don't want to overgeneralize. So I'll just say, so as a creative and as an artist, everything is at least to a degree personal. So whether I get up and I do a live audition someplace and there's that silence, or the casting director, whoever I'm doing that audition for, has no reaction that is visible or palpable to me, it's on a cellular level. I've done this over a decade and I will still just die inside. And
well, I mean, don't you see that often with a lot of people that are watching, judging you? You know, if they're casting you, that they actually are quite neutral and they don't react at all.
well, luckily, I in the sort of the scope that we're in after the pandemic, most of us were not in circumstances to go into studios to audition live. So for better or worse, like many of us, when I submit an audition, I'm in there just playing with the voices in my head, sending it off, and I don't know anything unless you book the gig. However,
Okay.
when you're on stage, that's a whole different world. And depending on why or why not it didn't land, you can feel that from a house too. If there's silence because they're offended versus they didn't get it versus it's just not your night or you suck or whatever it is, when you're put your whole self into it, and I think a lot of us do, especially in the early days, everything just, it's hard. You feel it to your core. And the person who is going to keep going is the person that can feel that moment of penetrating ire and dying inside and jump right back up and into it and make whatever course correction you need to. And that doesn't matter where you are or what you're doing. I think just in the course of life, it's good to have that skill, because there's no point in spending your life in fetal position rocking back and forth because something didn't land in the moment.
Right.
You don't fire angrily at the audience. You try to take the cues, and again, we're using the word audience, but really I think there's just a broader scope that applies to life in general and how we react and respond to whatever circumstances we find ourselves in. I joke and say people with ADHD are the world's greatest problem solvers. A lot of it's just because we have so much practice creating problems for ourselves that we know how to get out of them quickly. That when you
So are you identifying as?
I identifying as yeah, I guess, but I don't introduce myself that way.
No,
I mean,
no, yeah.
shit, dude, you walk into a room full of creatives, it's like alphabet soup.
Right.
And that's probably a different conversation for a different day. Right now, we're in a world full of adults that come from rub dirt on it generation and walk it off. So there's
Exactly. 100%. I mean, I know I get asked what about pronouns and I say, well, my pronoun is I'm asymmetrical. All right.
yeah,
So
yeah.
how about, how about love and justice? So is the highest function of comedy to expose injustice or to make people feel less alone while living with it?
I don't know why that actually has to be a question, to be honest with you, in terms of
Well, if I don't say it, you won't be able to respond in that way. So
I
that's
don't
the
believe
reason why.
yeah, I don't believe that the onus is on a comic to carry that kind of responsibility. If they
Okay.
choose to use their comedy as a vehicle to do that, I believe it's on an individual basis. And I fault none of their efforts. If I'm getting a ticket to a show, I don't want to deal with any of that shit. Honestly,
Mhm.
I want funny. And what is funny is relatable. And it's cool to find some identifying points where you do relate to somebody in terms of justice or injustice. I mean, if we're talking about justice for the fat kid in the dodgeball game, okay, yeah, that's cool. You know, punch up on that, and we'll commiserate over being the fat kid in the middle of the dodgeball field. In terms of the broader scope of current things, I'm probably not personally going to buy a ticket to that show, because if I'm going to that show, it is to alleviate that for a while.
Okay.
That's not to say that I'm not that guy that goes, "Hey, how about you just shut up and make me laugh there, asshole? I don't care about what your opinion is." Not at all. Use use your voice. If you have influence, if you have a platform and you feel it's appropriate to use your platform to extol your values and bring people together, whatever they are, absolutely do that. Do that. Um, Anybody online, their personal accounts, their professional accounts, whatever it is, go for it, because everybody has the entitlement to shut the hell up and keep scrolling. And
Yeah.
so I'll never say to a performer in any way, shape, or form, "How about you just do your job?" Because I'm not built like that. If I'm going to buy a ticket to see that person perform, I know who I'm going to see. So that's what I will expect to buy a ticket to go see. And
Yeah.
so it's just a matter of there's no onus, there's no responsibility for that whatsoever. And I hope that people don't start feeling that there is a responsibility for that.
No, and I don't think well, a lot of comedians do take
Mhm.
that as their goal, right? As their kind of like end point. This is what I'm working towards. So
Right.
conceptually. All right, very important.
Goal
Uh-huh.
versus responsibility, though.
Well, the question is the highest function of comedy. So, is it they could take it as a
No,
responsibility or a goal?
no. Highest function of comedy, no, not at
Okay.
all.
All
It's
right,
neither.
very
It's neither.
yeah. So, very important question. Advertising and self-promotion. So, who advertises themselves more? The comic, the comedian, or the magician? You know that place where you're not conscious and you're not sleeping either? That's your power bill to the electric company. Right here. I want us to be here with free energy, where the Wardenclyffe Tower meets the Eiffel Tower. But that's not where we are. We are here, where you've got the utility and you've got residential solar. Between these two, we know which one saves you money. This is where we can go in the meantime. But this is where I want us to be now, and this can be done now. So let me deputize you to represent DOSE, Department of Solar Efficiency, and let's get on the podcast to get the message out today. See you soon.
Define your use of the promotion and marketing, so forth. Because now we're
Well,
moving it into a professional scope. So are you
sure.
talking about purely the professional scope?
Well, I
If you're
mean,
selling tickets, it doesn't matter what you do. You gotta put yourself out there.
yeah. Well, then that's pretty much it because you don't see it as selling out then, right?
No, no, because if
Right.
you're going to put yourself on stage, whatever it is that you're doing, and whatever your stage happens to be, whatever your medium happens to be, if you want to engage with people, how they've got to know how to find you.
Right.
You know, I'm garbage at self promotion and marketing and all that stuff. So there are different ways to do that as well. To have people want to come and find you, and then you're creating an invitation for them to do that versus Sunday, Sunday, Sunday. It's people have to find you.
Okay, censorship and offense. So does a comic avoid offense while a comedian courts it to prove a point, like a magician?
How, again, in this context, how are they different? I
Well,
don't
yeah, one way
believe
to
a
see,
magician really dabbles in controversy so much as
well, they do take risk or at least simulated risk, right? So the
yeah.
idea here is that the comic being an external, like observant, the comment on observational comedy, maybe, and while the comedian's more of a character, and so an internalized identity. So, and obviously the magician is like I'm alluding to is they are potentially taking some serious risk, especially if these acts are dangerous. So,
Right.
yeah. So so the one that's externalized, are they potentially avoiding offense?
No, not necessarily. It's all trucks are vehicles, but not all vehicles are trucks.
Right.
So all comedians are comics, but not all comics are comedians. And some magicians are funny, but they ain't telling the same jokes. So
Right.
when it comes to who would be goal oriented in terms of intentionally being offensive versus trying to avoid it or just not caring, I don't I don't know that the person on stage always has control of it.
Right.
You have people online who argue over the subjectivity of the word frozen. Freeze the batter. There's like 2 days of people arguing over what freezing the batter. You can't say anything without offending somebody. And I have resting bitch face and resting bitch voice. So I've been in situations where I just ask somebody a question and it comes back around, why were you so ugly to a person? Just ask me where the bathroom was, dude. I wasn't aware that I had it. So when we aim to offend intentionally for shock value, that feels cheap to me.
Right.
Also, to censor yourself to avoid being offensive is pointless because you can't ever make that guarantee because being offended is a closed system. If
Well,
I'm offended by something, that's my problem.
right. Well, then who survives better in the cancel culture environment? The comic, the comedian, the magician, or the mudslinger?
Nobody.
Okay.
Nobody. It depends on the day. It depends on the topic. It depends on who has gone to a respective show or is in a particular environment that has influence enough to create issue for that individual. So if a magician is scantily clad on stage and somebody takes offense, or their assistant, gender notwithstanding, they interact with their assistant in a way that somebody finds inappropriate, and that person has the power and influence to garner the affection and alignment of other people, they can shut down a show. They can take somebody's livelihood because they personally took offense to something. And that's bullshit.
All right. So, Jen, speaking of bullshit, are you ready to enter the multiverse?
Yes.
All right. Board game Zoomcast, play versus performance. So, if comedy were a board game Zoomcast, are you competing as the colorist, adding tone, mood, and shading, or the Foley artist, building punchlines with soundscapes and timing?
Unfortunately, both.
Okay. Well, in the multiverse, so in the that means you're very many facets if you're there. So does
it,
comedy work better when it's painted vividly or when it's orchestrated sonically?
we as individual performers are sonic. I mean, have to we have to have and bring something into a moment that fully accentuates, because otherwise the Foley isn't funny. Does that make any sense?
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
mean
just the sound of meat slapping onto the ground as while you're playing D&D in and of itself may or may not be funny, but if you have the colors there with, working with that, and there's a collaboration and there's that chemistry, then it's all around funny. But I think on its own, I don't think on its own Foley necessarily, or the concept of Foley is in and of itself something that would carry that. Also, I'm an actor and comedian, and my ego screams that to the mountaintops. So, I was like, you got to have us, or it's not going to be funny. Mm-hmm. But yeah, you get me throwing sparks in that kind of an environment where I'm, if I'm with a group of people, we're playing D&D or a Zoomcast, whatever the board game is. Once you forget that it's a cast of some sort, then you're just in the moment. And whether you're a comic or a comedian or a magician or a sound artist and illustrator, all of those things come together and they gel and work in a unit that is always going to be much stronger because of the authenticity.
All right.
So bring it back around.
Right.
Yeah, because it's people love to eavesdrop. That whole fly on the wall concept is so much more engaging, I think, on so many different levels, where you just see people in playing, and it's fun, and it can be raucous, or it can be whatever it becomes. And because there is something natural about it, even if people are amplified versions of themselves, that is more fun and more engaging to watch than something that isn't that. I don't know.
Yeah. So here on the Comedians in Elevators podcast, we have a tradition where the previous guest asks a question for the next guest. And cool. The previous guest was Rick Allen. And his question for you, Jen, is how do you handle a heckler start to finish?
Oh, again, it depends on so many things, because hecklers are typically really easy to read. So one time I actually went off stage and I hugged a heckler.
And was that bad?
it won the day, not because they were crying at me. They just stood up. They were really aggressive and you suck and all these things. And by grace, somebody from the other side of the club, like it's 2,000, 2 tables over, said, well, can you do better? And I think it may have been one of the other guys. Yeah, I can. So, I mean, this is a person that just wanted attention. So I just went down and gave them a hug, and they didn't know what to do with that. So I believe that is the best way to win an argument, if you will. It is do something that the other individual has no idea what to do with. And when you're in a performance situation, it also has to be done in a way that again, you got to know your room, man, because you don't want to turn the room on you. I can be silver tongued, but I can also just venom quick, you know,
That's the way to do it.
and evil. And that, not that I haven't. And I do kind of enjoy it, because if you put yourself into that situation, that's what you have to expect. But you have to be smart about it too.
Well, you got to be a Scorpio. So last question, legacy.
I totally am a Scorpio.
Yeah. So I know. No, I guessed right.
What, you did your homework. Look at you.
Yeah, I didn't, but I was guessed. So there's more homework.
Yeah,
to come,
there's the guess. No, I think it's you have a vibe, and you pick up on vibes. And next time I'm in LA, I need my chakras fixed.
Okay. We could do that virtually as well. I'm working on it right now. Now that you mentioned,
you are. I can feel you right here. I can feel you right here.
All right. So Jenn, last question. Legacy. Who gets remembered? Will the comics' tight five survive time, or will the comedian's cultural point of view be more timeless?
It depends on the person and the people whose scope they impacted. You know, we have comedians, comics. We have people that touched our lives from the world of comedy. Call them a comic, a comedian, whatever you will, who are with us always, especially if you're a performer. That, you know, people that resonate and touch your life in ways that are inextricable. Robin Williams, Richard Pryor, Steve Martin, Billy Crystal, people, the not ready for primetime players, people who have Deborah Wilson, who is a prolific voice actor now as well. She's amazing. And so I believe it depends on who you are and how an individual affects you in their performance and the time in your life that you find their comedy and you find those identification or relevance points. That is what is going to determine how somebody is remembered. I don't believe that there is necessarily a cultural stripe that can be painted for that, because it is entirely because everything is so subjective. The people who are remembered by those whose lives they touched in some way or another.
Awesome. So Jenn, where can everybody find you?
Was that like too deep, dude? Was that
no.
like weird and stuff? Okay, cool.
Hilarious. Well, so where can everybody find you online?
I can be found at Jenn, Jenn, henrycreatives.com. If you happen to be in voiceover or not, and you just like the environment, I will be at Voiceover Atlanta. That website is voatlanta.com or ME. I'm doing workshops and some panels there, and just generally rolling around in the awesomeness of being around people that are just as weird as you. And then I'll be in Dallas also at the One Voice Conference, doing the same thing, rolling around in like minds and weirdness. And I get places as often as I can. So,
all right. Awesome. Well, Jenn, thank you so much for being my guest. And for everyone, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.
Thank you.
If you're interested in too much information like in the network state or Mantipus the chicken shit, check out this video. Or is it this one right here? Well, either way. Lizard.